Hello again, this is John from k4programming.com, and this is a tutorial on how to separate your components in your Swing application to maintain a kind of simple, clear architecture. So in the last tutorial I showed you how to create this little app, and the problem with this is that I've got a tightly coupled toolbar and text area, and I've got my main frame here, which is responsible for creating the components. I've got two components, a toolbar and a text panel. But the trouble is that the toolbar is communicating directly with the text panel, which is not healthy, because we want all communication to go through our controller, the main frame. Now, to do that, I'm going to just use, to start with, a simple interface, because I want to have the idea of a thing that can receive messages that contain strings. So all the toolbar really does at the moment is when you click one of those two buttons, it sort of emits a string that's either hello or goodbye. And the first step here is I want to codify the idea of a thing that can receive that hello or goodbye string. So what I'll do is I'll go to New Interface, and I'll call this interface, let's call it String Listener. How's that? String Listener. It's not too important. And I'm going to give String Listener one method header. I'll make it public void, and let's call it I don't know actually, let's call it string or text. Well, I'll tell you what, let's look at main frame. In fact, let's look at the toolbar. So when you listen to events on a button, you have an action listener. So the action listener interface has this action performed method in it, and anything that wants to listen to a button has to have the action perform method. So in this interface, let's give this a text performed, or maybe a text emitted method. I think that'll do. Okay, and I'll make that a type string, and so what this is saying is that anything that implements the string listener interface has to have a method called text emitted that accepts a string. And now the beauty of this is that I can, in my toolbar, I can make it fire an event to a listener that implements this if someone clicks a button. So let's see how that would work. Basically, instead of a text panel here, I'm going to give it a private variable of type string listener, and I'll call that text listener. And I need a method for setting this string listener. So at the moment I've got a method called set text panel. I'm going to change that, get rid of that. I'm going to have a method public void set, and I'll call it set string listener, like this. And the set string listener method accepts any object that implements the string listener interface. Let's call that listener. And what it does with it is it saves a reference to this up here. So let's say this.text listener, this.text listener equals listener. So what I can do now is, and let's just get rid of, let's comment out the references to text panel for the moment. So in my toolbar, I've given it a variable of type string listener. The string listener interface just says that an object should have one method called text emitted, which accepts a string, and I've supplied the toolbar with a method to set this text listener here. Now in my main frame, the beauty of this is I can say toolbar dot set text listener, set string listener, and then I can use an anonymous class just as I do with the buttons here. So with a button you can do, actually this isn't an anonymous class, but in an earlier tutorial I showed you how to use an anonymous class with a button and the action listener, and we're going to do the same thing here. So I'll say set string listener, new string listener, as though string listener was a class, then open a bracket, and so Eclipse has put in the closing bracket here, and I just need to add the missing methods, add unimplemented methods, and at the moment I'll just output this text here. So let's get rid of some of this extra space. So my string listener class, it just has this text emitted method, and at the moment it's just going to print out the text here. And now in the toolbar, when a button's clicked, if the hello button's clicked, I'm going to say if the text listener has been set, so if it's not equal to null, then I can say text listener and call the text emitted method of text listener and pass in hello, because the hello button's been clicked at this point. And I can do the same if the goodbye button's been clicked. And here we go, goodbye. And now finally, the final step here is that in the main frame, if this text emitted thing happens, well, let's first just run it and see if it works. So let's minimize the editor here, go to my swing app and click hello and goodbye, and you can see that that's working. There's a little more space than I expected. That's because I've got a print ln, which also adds on a new line. But now all I have to do is get the text panel and call text panel.append text. So if I run that, and I've got the same results as before. Now don't worry if this seems pretty complex, because it is a little bit complicated, but when you get your head around this, you've understood basically the most important facts about getting the communication working, getting your components wired together in Swing. And the whole trick to it is that you have one component where you set some kind of listener or add some kind of listener, and a controller, some kind of central communication switchboard listens to that those messages and tells other components what to do when the messages occur. And so I've got this method here, this interface enables me basically to separate the toolbar and the text area. And so the toolbar now doesn't know anything about the text area. There's no reference to text areas in this button. All there is a reference to a string listener, which could be any kind of class, because all the toolbar cares about is that the string listener should have some method called text emitted, so that the toolbar can call that method when a button is clicked, and that's all that the toolbar has to know about or care about. And in the main frame intercepts these method calls. So the toolbar is basically, when a button's clicked, it's calling the text emitted method, which is actually the method of this anonymous class here. So it's calling this, and then in here, in the controller, the main frame, we then append that text to the text panel by calling a method that we added to text panel. That is pretty tricky, but if you just kind of have a look at the code and type this out yourself, you will get the hang of it. And if it seems particularly complex, it's almost not worth worrying about it too much. If you just type it out and then maybe, I don't know, type it out again like a day later, with variations, of course, to make it more interesting, then it will start to sink into your synapses and you will understand how it works. And when you've understood this, you've basically got swing, and using this technique you can build up very complex swing apps, and you can keep the communication simple between components, and they won't turn into, hopefully, a rat's nest. I'm just going to mention very quickly here that if you this is called set string listener, but you often see methods called add action listener, for example, and that's because you can add multiple listeners to swing components. And the way they deal with it is, instead of having a single reference, they have like an array list of references in effect, and they just iterate through that array list and notify any listener that's been added anywhere. And we might look at that in a future tutorial if it comes up, but this simple technique, relatively simple, will get you through most cases. Okay, so join me again for the next tutorial, when I'm not quite sure what we're going to do, but we're going to further work on this swing application and make it a bit more interesting. So until then, happy coding.